My mom smiled at her new husband like he saved her. Then my uncle whispered, "Ask him what name he used before." At dinner, he mentioned my dead father like they had history. My mom froze. So I found the old photo and before that photo, I thought I was just being the bitter daughter who couldn't let her mother move on. My mom got married in a small courthouse with a few relatives, grocery store flowers, and a smile I hadn't seen on her face in years. Everyone kept saying how beautiful it was, how brave she was, how good it was that she had finally found happiness after losing my dad. I wanted to believe that. My dad, Nathan, died when I was 14. It was sudden. One week he was fixing a loose cabinet in our kitchen and teasing my mom about buying too many coffee mugs, and then he was gone. After the funeral, I found her standing in the hallway, still in her black dress, staring at his shoes by the door like she couldn't understand why they were still there without him. After that, it was just us. My mom, Diana, did her best. She worked, paid bills, kept the house running, and raised me while carrying grief she almost never talked about. I wasn't always easy on her. Losing my dad made me clingy in some ways and cold in others. I wanted her to be okay, but I also hated the idea of anyone taking his place. So when she told me she was seeing someone named Walter, I tried to be fair. Walter was polite. Too polite, maybe. He knew when to laugh, when to touch my mom's shoulder, when to compliment her without sounding fake. He brought flowers. He opened doors. He called me sweetheart once, and I must have made a face because after that he used my name instead. There was nothing obviously wrong with him. That was what bothered me. Something about him felt familiar. Not comforting. More like a half-remembered voice from another room. Like I had seen his face in an old photo but couldn't place it. I asked my mom once if Walter had ever known our family before. She smiled too quickly and said, "Not really." Why? Not really. I should have pushed then, but I didn't. At the courthouse, my uncle Roger arrived late, which was normal for him. He was my dad's brother, blunt and impossible to quiet when he had an opinion. He could be exhausting, but he was also the only person who still talked about my dad like he had been a real man, not just a framed picture everyone felt awkward mentioning. After the ceremony, Roger walked up to Walter to congratulate him. I saw Walter's face change. It was small but clear. His smile tightened. His shoulders stiffened. He shook Roger's hand for half a second and pulled away like he had touched something hot. Roger said, "Congratulations." Walter said, "Thank you." That was all, but the air between them felt old. Later, near the parking lot, I saw my mom arguing with Roger. She looked furious. Roger looked like someone had finally said the quiet part out loud. When I asked her about it the next day, she said Roger had been drinking and acting rude. That was believable enough. Roger drank too much at family events and said things he shouldn't, so I let it go. But the feeling stayed. A few months later, my mom sold our old house and moved in with Walter. She said it was practical. The house was too big, too much work, too full of memories. I nodded like I understood, but it hurt. That house was the last place where my dad still felt close. The cabinet he fixed was still there. The back deck he built with Roger leaned slightly to one side, but it held. The marks on the pantry door from when my mom measured my height were still visible under the paint if the light hit right. Selling it felt like losing him again. Only this time everyone expected me to be mature about it. Thanksgiving was the first holiday at Walter's house. I almost didn't go, but my mom called the week before and said, "Please don't make this harder than it has to be." So I went. Walter's house looked like him. Clean. Controlled. Nothing out of place. My mom had added her blue serving bowl and a framed photo of me from college, but the place still didn't feel like hers. Dinner was tense from the beginning. Roger sat across from Walter and barely touched his food. My mom kept filling the silence with safe little comments about the turkey, the weather, anything that couldn't start a fight. Then Walter mentioned my dad. Roger had made a joke about Nathan once talking his way out of a parking ticket. Walter gave a low laugh and said, "Nathan was always better at making people like him than telling the truth." The table went quiet. My mom turned to him and said, "Walter." Just his name. Sharp and low. I looked at him. "What does that mean?" Walter smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Nothing. Old stories. Old stories." My dad had been dead for 15 years. Walter was supposed to be someone my mom met recently. He wasn't supposed to have old stories about my father. I asked, "You knew my dad?" My mom answered before he could. "They knew of each other." I stared at her. "That's not an answer." She put her napkin down and told me not to start. She said we were having a nice dinner and I was reading too much into one comment. Roger leaned back in his chair and stared at his plate like he was trying not to explode. Walter said, very calmly, your mother doesn't owe you every piece of her past. That sentence chilled me. Because this wasn't just my mother's past. It was my father's too. After dinner, I followed my mom into the laundry room while she carried dishes she didn't need to carry. I shut the door behind us and asked, did Walter know Dad? She looked tired before I even finished. It was a long time ago, she said. So yes. It's complicated. That usually means yes. She rubbed her forehead and told me I was acting like a child. She said I missed my dad and didn't like change. She said Walter was good to her and that should matter. I told her not to use my grief as a shield because she didn't want to tell the truth. Her face changed. Less sad. More scared. Before she could answer, Walter opened the door. He didn't look surprised. It felt like he had been listening. He said, this is between me and your mother. No, I said. The second you brought my dad into it at dinner, it involved me. My mom whispered my name like a warning. Walter's voice stayed calm. Your father wasn't perfect. I stared at him. You don't get to talk about him. He said, maybe you don't know him as well as you think. That was when I left. My mom texted me later that night. She said I embarrassed her. She said Walter had been kind to me. She said the holidays were emotional, but I had to stop punishing her for wanting a life. I didn't answer. A week later, Roger called and asked me to meet him for coffee. I thought he wanted to rant. That was his pattern. He'd get angry, complain, then tell me to forget he said anything. I almost said no, but something in his voice sounded different. He sounded sober. When I arrived, he was already in a corner booth with a folder on the table. I tried to laugh. What is this? He didn't smile. Your mom should have told you, he said. He opened the folder and slid a photo across the table. It was old and faded. My dad was in it, younger than I had ever seen him, standing beside Roger and a group of people near a lake. My mom was there too, smiling with her hair pulled back. And Walter was standing behind her. Only Roger didn't call him Walter. He tapped the photo and said, back then, he went by Wayne. I stared until my eyes hurt. He was younger, thinner, with darker hair, but it was him. Same smile. Same crease beside his mouth. Same way of standing like he already knew where everyone belonged. I said no. Roger said, I'm sorry. He told me Walter had been close to my dad's family years before I was born. Not blood related. Not legally family. Just around all the time because his mother had been friends with my grandmother. He spent summers with them. He knew my dad, Roger, and my grandparents. Then he got close to my mom. Before she married my dad, she briefly dated Walter. Roger said it wasn't some grand love story, but Walter took it seriously. When my mom chose Nathan, Walter acted like Nathan had stolen something from him. My dad cut him off. My grandparents stopped inviting him around. Walter left town not long after. It was strange, but not unforgivable by itself. People have pasts. People date the wrong person before choosing someone else. I didn't understand why my mom would hide something that old unless there was more. Roger looked at me like he knew exactly what I was thinking. Then he said, he came back before Nathan died. Not after. Before. The noise in the coffee shop seemed to disappear. I asked, what are you saying? Roger looked down at the folder. Your dad found messages. My hands went cold. He told me my dad had called him one night, furious and humiliated. Nathan had found emails between my mom and Walter. Roger didn't know every detail, but he knew they were emotional, personal, and full of things a married woman shouldn't have been sending to a man who still believed her husband had stolen her. I asked if my mom cheated. Roger didn't give me a clean answer. He said he didn't know if it became physical. He only knew my dad felt betrayed. My parents had a terrible fight. My dad had talked about separating for a while just to think. Then he died. So nothing ever got resolved. Roger slid 2 more pages toward me. One was a copy of an old funeral guestbook page. Walter had signed it under the name Wayne. The other was an email my dad had sent Roger. It wasn't long. It didn't explain everything. But one sentence made my throat close. I feel like a fool in my own marriage. I read it over and over. My dad had written that. My dad, who made pancakes shaped like bad stars because he knew I liked them. My dad, who danced with my mom in the kitchen. My dad, who I had spent half my life believing died loved and secure. Maybe he didn't. Maybe he died wondering if my mom still loved him. I went home and threw up. For 2 days, I didn't call my mom. I didn't call Roger either. I just sat with the folder on my kitchen table like it was something alive. I kept thinking about every year my mom cried at my dad's grave. Every birthday cake she bought for him after he died, just so we could sit together and remember him. Every time she told me he loved us more than anything. Had she been grieving him or grieving what she did to him? When I finally went to her, I brought the photo. I didn't warn her. I didn't want her to prepare a speech. Walter answered the door. For a second, neither of us moved. Then he saw the folder in my hand, and his expression changed. He said, "Your mother's resting. Then wake her up." My mom came into the living room wearing a cardigan and a careful expression, like she already knew the conversation would hurt. I put the photo on the coffee table. "Were you going to tell me?" I asked, "or was I supposed to keep playing along forever?" She sat down slowly. Walter stayed standing. My mom looked at the picture for a long time. Then she closed her eyes. That was the moment I knew Roger had told the truth. I asked why Walter had used a different name. She said he used his middle name back then. I asked why she lied about knowing him. She said she didn't lie. She just didn't tell me everything because it was painful and old. I said, "You married the man Dad thought you were cheating with." She flinched. Walter stepped forward. "That is not fair." I turned to him. "Don't." He said, "Your father misunderstood a lot of things." I laughed because I couldn't believe he had the nerve to sound offended. "My father is dead," I said. "You got 15 years to make yourself look better." He didn't. My mom started crying. She said it wasn't physical. She said she and Walter reconnected during a bad time in her marriage. My dad had been distant. She felt lonely. The messages were wrong, but she ended it before anything happened. I asked, "Did Dad know you ended it?" She didn't answer. That told me enough. Then she said the sentence I still hear when I'm trying to sleep. "Your father was a good man, but he was not a saint." I felt something inside me go still. "You don't get to do that," I said. "Do what?" "Make him smaller so this feels less ugly." She looked hurt, but I didn't stop. I told her she had every right to remarry. She had every right to be lonely. She had every right to want someone beside her after all those years. But she didn't have the right to bring that specific man back into our family and pretend he was a stranger. She didn't have the right to sell me a story about fate when the truth was that he had been circling our family for decades. Walter said, "I loved your mother before Nathan ever did." The room went silent. My mom whispered, "Walter." I looked at him and realized he had been waiting to say something like that. Maybe not those exact words, but something close. Something that made him feel like he had won. I said, "That is the sickest part. You still think this is some romance where you finally got the girl." His face hardened. He said, "You are grieving a version of your father that never existed." I said, "And you waited around like a vulture for a woman who was married." My mom slapped me. It wasn't hard enough to leave a mark, but it shocked all three of us. Her hand flew to her mouth right after, like she couldn't believe she had done it. Walter said my name. My mom started apologizing. I picked up the folder and walked out. For 3 months, I didn't speak to her. She emailed. Sometimes she apologized. Sometimes she blamed Roger. Sometimes she said I had no idea what it was like to be widowed young and alone. Sometimes she said I was punishing her for surviving. Walter sent one message too. He wrote that he was sorry I had chosen resentment over a living relationship. I deleted it. I didn't block my mom. I couldn't. But I stopped answering anything that wasn't practical. If she asked if I was okay, I said yes. If she said she missed me, I closed the message and hated myself a little. That was the worst part. I still loved her. She had raised me. She had packed my lunches, sat through school concerts, held me when I cried for my dad. She wasn't a monster. That made everything harder. If she had been cruel my whole life, cutting her off would have felt cleaner. But she had been a good mother in many ways. And still, she had done something I couldn't make peace with. Eventually, she asked to meet without Walter. I almost said no. Then I thought about ignoring her forever and realized I wasn't ready for that either. We met at a quiet diner. She looked older than I remembered. Smaller somehow. Her hands shook when she picked up her coffee. The first thing she said was, "I should have told you before the wedding." I said yes. She admitted Walter knew exactly who she was when he found her online. He acted surprised, but she knew he wasn't. She said she wanted to believe it was coincidence, because coincidence felt romantic. The real version sounded ugly. I asked her again if she cheated on my dad. She looked at the table and said, emotionally, yes. For some reason, that hurt more than another lie would have. Because it was finally honest. She said there were no hotel rooms or secret weekends. But there were messages, long calls, and old memories she had no business reopening while married. My dad found out and felt betrayed. She cut Walter off afterward, but the trust between her and Nathan never fully came back. Then my dad died, and she spent years carrying guilt nobody knew about. I asked why she married Walter after all that. She said, because he remembered who I was before I became a widow. I wanted to feel compassion. Part of me did. Another part wanted to shake her. I said he remembered the woman who hurt Dad. She cried quietly. I didn't comfort her. She asked if I could understand that loneliness changes people. I told her I understood loneliness. I grew up with it sitting at our dinner table. I understood missing someone so badly that you reached for anything familiar. But understanding wasn't the same as blessing it. She asked what I wanted from her. I said, I want you to stop pretending this is a love story. She looked at me for a long time. Then she said, it is a love story to me. That was when I knew we weren't standing in the same version of the truth. Christmas came a month later. My mom asked me to come over. She said Walter would be respectful. Nobody would discuss the past. She just wanted one normal holiday. I told her I would come if Walter wasn't there. She said, he's my husband. I said, then spend Christmas with your husband. She cried. I hated hearing it. I hated myself for not changing my mind. I spent Christmas with Roger, Beverly, Chloe, and a few cousins. It wasn't magical. It was awkward and too quiet in places. Roger burned the rolls. Beverly tried to keep conversation moving. Chloe took one picture and asked before posting it because she knew my mom would see. I said it was fine. That night, my mom texted me. I hope you're proud of yourself. I cried all day. I typed 3 different replies and deleted all of them. The truth was, I wasn't proud. I wasn't happy. I didn't feel powerful or righteous. I felt like I had chosen the least dishonest option, and it still hurt. Since then, I've kept my distance. I answer basic messages. I visit only when Walter isn't there. I don't call him my stepfather. When people ask, I say he is my mom's husband. That sounds cold, but it is the only wording that feels true. Some relatives think I'm wrong. They say my mom suffered enough. They say my dad has been gone for years, and I am letting a dead marriage control a living family. They say Walter didn't technically do anything to me. Maybe that is true. But I keep thinking about my dad reading those messages alone. I keep thinking about him calling Roger because he didn't know what else to do. I keep thinking about that sentence in his email. I feel like a fool in my own marriage. Everyone else got time to rewrite what happened. My mom got to call it loneliness. Walter got to call it old love. Roger got to call it betrayal. Relatives got to call it messy adult history. My dad got no ending. So maybe my quiet revenge is refusing to help them make one. I won't expose my mom. I won't demand people choose sides. But I also won't sit at Walter's table and pretend he is some sweet second chance who arrived after the grief. He was there before the grief. That matters to me. My mom says I'm choosing the past over her. I don't think I am. I think I'm choosing honesty over a version of peace that only works if I swallow the truth. I still miss my mother. I miss who she was before I knew this. I miss believing grief made us closer instead of hiding something underneath us. Maybe one day I'll forgive her more than I can right now. Maybe I'll regret the holidays I skipped. Maybe I'll look back and think I was too harsh on a lonely woman who made human mistakes. But right now, all I know is this. My dad can't defend himself. My mom can love whoever she wants. Walter can call it fate if that helps him sleep. But I don't have to call it family. So am I wrong for refusing to accept my mom's husband after learning he was part of the betrayal that broke my dad? Or is this one of those things a daughter is allowed to never forgive?